Dr. David Chen had been floating through space for 3 months, and honestly, he was getting pretty tired of looking at stars. The research ship Horizon was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement in deep space exploration, but now it felt more like a very expensive prison with a really good view. David worked as the ship's alien life specialist, which sounded way cooler than it actually was. Most days, he just stared at empty space through his computer screens, hoping to spot something interesting. His job was to study any alien life they might find, but so far the universe seemed pretty empty. That Tuesday started like any other day in space. David was drinking his morning coffee and checking the long-range sensors when something made him sit up straight. There, drifting about 2 miles away, was a ship unlike anything he'd ever seen. It looked more like a giant flower, made of crystal than a spacecraft. Its walls seemed to glow with a soft blue light, and the whole thing was shaped like it had grown naturally instead of being built. David rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was seeing things after too much time in space, but the ship was definitely real. "Computer, scan that object," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The computer's analysis came back strange. The ship was made of materials that shouldn't exist, at least not according to human science. It was giving off energy readings that made no sense, and most importantly, there were life signs aboard. David knew he should call Captain Rodriguez right away. Protocol said to report any alien contact immediately, but something about the ship called to him. It looked peaceful, almost sad, floating there all alone in the darkness. Before he could change his mind, David suited up and took one of the small shuttlecraft over to investigate. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his helmet. This was it. First contact with alien life. Everything he'd studied and dreamed about his whole career was about to become real. Getting inside the alien ship was easier than he expected. A section of the crystal wall simply dissolved as he approached, like it was welcoming him in. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside. The walls pulsed gently with that same blue light, and the air felt warm and clean when he removed his helmet. David walked carefully through corridors that curved and flowed like they were part of some living thing. Everything was smooth and organic, with no sharp edges or mechanical parts visible anywhere. It was like being inside a dream. Then he heard it, a sound like wind chimes mixed with music. Someone was singing, but in a language that didn't use words. The melody was so beautiful it made his chest tight with emotion he couldn't name. Following the sound, David found himself in what might have been a main room. In the center, sitting on something that looked like a throne made of flowing water, was the most incredible being he'd ever seen. She was clearly not human, but beautiful in a way that took his breath away. Her skin had a soft glow to it, like moonlight on water, and it was slightly see-through so he could see patterns of light moving underneath. Her hair floated around her head like she was underwater, changing colors from silver to blue to purple. When she looked at him, her eyes were huge and filled with what looked like tiny stars. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. David felt like he should say something, but his mouth had forgotten how to work. The alien woman looked just as shocked as he felt. She stood up slowly, never taking those incredible eyes off his face. Then something amazing happened. Without her lips moving, David heard her voice in his head. It was gentle and musical, like her singing had been. "You are not of my people," she said, though her mouth never opened. "What manner of being are you?" David tried to speak and found his voice came out as a croak. I'm human. From Earth. My name is David." She tilted her head, studying him, with the intensity of someone seeing something impossible. "Human," she repeated, and the word sounded like music when she said it. "I have never seen a human before. I have studied your kind in the learning crystals, but you are so different than I imagined." "Learning crystals?" David managed to ask. Knowledge stored in crystal form, she explained. I know of many species, but I have never met any of them. I am... She paused, as if deciding whether to trust him. I am Princess Zara of the Kitherian Empire. A princess. David was talking to an actual alien princess. He tried to wrap his head around it and failed completely. Princess, he said, and gave a little bow because it seemed like the right thing to do. Why are you here alone? Something sad flickered across her face. I fled from my home world. There are those who would force me into a life I do not want. My ship's navigation failed, and I have been drifting for days. David felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised him. Here was this beautiful, obviously intelligent being, stranded and afraid. Without thinking, he reached into his supply pack and pulled out a water bottle and an energy bar. Are you hungry? Thirsty? He asked, holding them out to her. Zara stared at the items with fascination. You offer me sustenance, even though we have just met? It's what humans do, David said with a small smile. We help each other. She reached out to take the water bottle, and her fingers brushed against his. The touch sent a strange tingling sensation up his arm, like a mild electric shock, but pleasant. Zara gasped and jerked her hand back, staring at him with wonder. Your flesh is so solid, she whispered. So warm. My people are not like this. She held up her own hand, and David could see right through it to the wall behind. Can I? David asked, gesturing toward her hand. She nodded, curious. When David gently touched her palm with his, her skin felt cool and smooth, but definitely real. Where their skin met, tiny sparkles of light appeared, like fireflies dancing between their fingers. Amazing, they both said at the same time, then looked at each other and laughed. The sound of her laughter was like silver bells, and it made David's heart feel lighter than it had in months. You must return to your people, Zara said, but her voice was sad. Tell them about me if you wish. I understand that I am likely very different from what you expected to find in space. Actually, David said, making a decision that would change everything. I was hoping you might come with me. My ship isn't far, and we have medical facilities, food, proper sleeping quarters. You shouldn't be alone out here. Zara's eyes went wide. You would take me to your ship? With your people? If you want to come, David said. I promise no one will hurt you. My crew are scientists and explorers. They'll be fascinated to meet you, but they're good people. For the first time since he'd met her, Zara smiled. It was like watching the sun come up. I would like that very much, David of Earth, she said. I have spent my entire life learning about other species from crystals and data streams. To actually meet them, to speak with them. It is beyond my dreams. As they prepared to leave her ship, David couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was going to change everything. Not just for him, but for humanity itself. He was bringing back the first alien contact in human history, and she was a princess from an advanced civilization. But more than that, there was something about Zara that called to him on a level he didn't understand. When she looked at him with those star-filled eyes, he felt like he was seeing himself clearly for the first time. Are you ready? He asked as they reached his shuttle. I am ready for anything, Zara replied. As long as you are there to guide me. Neither of them realized it yet, but those words would prove more prophetic than either could imagine. Their meeting was just the beginning of an adventure that would test everything they believed about love, duty, and what it meant to belong, somewhere in the vast universe. As David's shuttle carried them both back toward the horizon, Zara pressed her face to the window, watching her crystal ship grow smaller behind them. She was leaving behind everything she'd ever known, but for the first time in her long life, she felt truly free. And David, glancing at his extraordinary passenger, felt like his real life was finally about to begin. The moment David brought Zara aboard the Horizon, everything changed. Not just for him, but for the entire crew of 43 people who suddenly found themselves face to face with humanity's first alien visitor. Captain Rodriguez nearly dropped his coffee mug when David walked into the main corridor with a glowing, translucent woman floating slightly above the floor. Yes, floating. Zara didn't seem to walk like humans did. Instead, she moved with a graceful gliding motion that made her look like she was dancing through water. "David," the captain said slowly, "please tell me you didn't just bring an unknown alien life form onto my ship without following any safety protocols." David winced. "Well, technically speaking—" "He saved me," Zara interrupted, her musical voice filling everyone's minds at once. Several crew members jumped, looking around in confusion. "I mean no harm to your people. I am Princess Zara of Kythera, and I am most grateful for David's kindness." The captain stared at her for a full minute. Then he sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "I need a drink. A very large drink." Over the next few days, Zara became the ship's most fascinating mystery. She followed David everywhere, asking endless questions about the most ordinary things. Why did humans need to eat hot food when cold food had the same nutrition? How could they sleep lying down when standing was more efficient? Why did their faces change shape when they were happy? "It's called smiling," David explained for the 10th time that morning. They were in the ship's cafeteria, and Zara was watching him eat breakfast with the intensity of a scientist studying a new species. "Smiling," she repeated, the word creating little sparkles in the air around her mouth. "And this indicates pleasure?" "Usually, yes. Sometimes we smile when we're nervous too, or when we're trying to be polite, even if we don't feel happy." Zara looked confused. "Why would you show false emotions?" "It's complicated," David said with a laugh. "Humans are complicated." "Yes," Zara agreed, but wonderfully so. The way she said it made David's heart skip a beat. There was something in her star-filled eyes that made him feel like the most interesting person in the universe. Dr. Lisa Kim, the ship's psychologist, was less charmed by their new guest. She cornered David in the medical bay later that afternoon. "David, I'm concerned about your attachment to our visitor," she said carefully. "You're spending every waking moment with her. You're not eating properly, you're barely sleeping, and yesterday I caught you trying to teach her how to laugh." "She's never experienced laughter before," David said, defensively. "Her people don't express joy the way we do. Don't you think that's fascinating?" "What I think is that you're becoming emotionally involved with a being we know nothing about," Dr. Kim replied. "We don't know her true intentions, her capabilities, or even if her species is compatible with ours in any way." David wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. He was falling for Zara, and falling hard. Every moment with her felt like discovering something magical. The way she looked at the world with such wonder and curiosity made him see his own life differently. Meanwhile, Zara was having her own revelations. That evening, she found David in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars. She materialized beside him in that graceful way of hers, her presence making the air shimmer slightly. "You seem troubled, David of Earth," she said softly. "Just thinking," he replied. "Tell me about your home world. What's it like being a princess?" Zara's glow dimmed a little. "Lonely," she said simply. "I lived in towers made of crystal, high above the cities. I could see my people below, but I was never allowed to meet them. Royal blood must remain pure, they said, untainted by common interaction." "That sounds horrible. I thought it was normal until I met you," Zara said. "Your people work together, eat together, share their thoughts and feelings openly. On Kythera, emotions are considered weakness. We are taught to suppress them from childhood. Is that why you were so fascinated? By smiling? Yes. And by laughter. And the way your crew members touch each other's shoulders in friendship. And how you share food without ceremony. Everything you do speaks of connection. My people have forgotten how to connect. David turned to look at her properly. In the starlight, she was almost too beautiful to be real. Is that why you ran away? Zara nodded. They wanted to bond me to General Kex, a warrior of great strength but no kindness. The bonding would link our minds permanently. I would become an extension of his will, losing myself forever. I could not bear it. So you stole a ship and ran? I prefer to think of it as borrowing indefinitely, Zara said with what David was, learning to recognize as her version of humor. But yes, I fled into space with no plan except to escape. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Zara did something that changed everything. She reached out and took David's hand in both of hers. The moment their skin touched, the lights in the observation deck flickered. Not just flickered. They began pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. Zara gasped and tried to pull away, but David held on. It's okay, he said. Whatever this is, it's okay. David, I think I am affecting your ship's systems, Zara whispered. This has never happened before. As if to prove her point, the computer screens around them began displaying patterns that looked like music made visible. Beautiful, flowing designs that shifted and changed as Zara's emotions changed. Computer, David called out, run a diagnostic on all systems. All systems functioning normally, the computer replied. However, energy readings in the observation deck are unusual. Dr. Kim's voice crackled over the intercom. David, we're getting some strange readings from your location. Is everything all right? David looked at Zara, who was staring at their joined hands with wonder and fear. Everything's fine, he called back. Just some minor fluctuations. But everything wasn't fine. Over the next few hours, strange things began happening all over the ship. Lights would brighten when Zara was happy and dim when she was sad. The computer began playing soft music whenever she entered a room. Most remarkably, the ship's artificial gravity became more comfortable for everyone, as if Zara's presence was somehow improving their technology. This is impossible, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez muttered as he ran diagnostics for the 5th time that day. The ship's systems are working better than they have since launch, but there's no logical reason for it. Captain Rodriguez called a senior staff meeting that evening. David knew it was about Zara, and he was right. We need to discuss our passenger, the captain said without preamble. She's affecting our ship in ways we don't understand. Some of the crew are getting nervous. She's not dangerous, David insisted. If anything, she's improving our systems. That's exactly what worries me, Dr. Kim said. How is she doing it? What else might she be capable of? And what happens if she loses control? She's a person, not a weapon, David shot back. She's scared, alone, and trying to understand our world just as much as we're trying to understand hers. David's right, said Navigation Officer Rachel Park. I've been monitoring her interactions with the crew. She's genuinely curious and friendly. Yesterday, she spent 2 hours helping me recalibrate the star charts, and they've never been more accurate. And she fixed the coffee machine in engineering, Tony added grudgingly. Just touched it, and suddenly it makes the best coffee I've ever tasted. Captain Rodriguez rubbed his temples. The question is, what do we do now? We can't just drop her off at the nearest space station. She's clearly royalty from an advanced civilization. This could be the most important diplomatic contact in human history. Or it could be a disaster if her people come looking for her, Dr. Kim warned. As if summoned by her words, the ship's long-range sensors began beeping urgently. Communications Officer Jake Williams looked up from his console with a pale face. Captain, he said, his voice tight with tension, I'm picking up 3 large ships on approach. Their technology is, well, it's way beyond anything we have. And Captain? They're not responding to our hails, but they're definitely coming this way. David felt his blood turn to ice. He looked at Zara, who had just entered the bridge. Her glowing skin had gone completely pale, and her eyes were wide with fear. "They found me," she whispered, and every light on the bridge flickered as her distress spiked through the ship's systems. "General Kex has found me." Captain Rodriguez stood up slowly. "Well," he said, with the calm of a man who'd faced impossible odds before, "I guess we're about to find out just how important our passenger really is." David moved to stand beside Zara, taking her hand despite the sparks that flew between their fingers. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. But deep in his heart, he knew their peaceful time of discovery and wonder was about to end. The real test was just beginning. The 3 alien ships appeared on the horizon's view screen like nightmares made real. Each one was massive, easily 10 times larger than their research vessel. They looked like giant crystals carved into the shape of predatory birds with wings. That seemed to cut through space itself. Dark energy crackled along their surfaces, and even through the cold vacuum of space, they radiated menace. "My God," Captain Rodriguez whispered, staring at the display. "I've never seen anything like them." David felt Zara's hand tighten in his. Her whole body was trembling, and the lights throughout the bridge were flickering in response to her fear. She looked smaller somehow, as if the sight of those ships had drained something vital from her. "Those are Cytherian war vessels," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Each one carries 1,000 warriors. They could destroy your ship without even slowing down." "Incoming transmission," Communications Officer Jake announced, his fingers dancing over his controls. They're speaking directly into our computer systems somehow. I can't block it." The main screen shifted, and suddenly they were looking at a being that made Zara seem almost human by comparison. General Kex was tall and angular, with skin like polished black stone shot through with veins of silver. His eyes glowed with cold fire. And when he moved, David could see that his body was partially covered in some kind of living armor that pulsed with its own light. "Humans of the vessel Horizon," Kex said, his voice booming through their speakers with mechanical precision. "You harbor Princess Zara of the Royal House of Kythera. Return her immediately, and you will be allowed to continue your pathetic journey through space." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, trying to project authority despite the fact that their visitor could probably swat them like a fly. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Horizon. Princess Zara requested sanctuary with us. We don't hand over refugees." Kex's laugh was like breaking glass. "Refugees? You simple creatures understand nothing. Zara is property of the Cytherian Empire, promised to me in a bonding that will unite 2 great houses. Her childish rebellion endangers billions of lives. I'm not property." Zara suddenly stepped into view of the screen, her fear transforming into anger. The lights on the bridge flared brighter. "I am a person with the right to choose my own fate." "You are a foolish child," Kex replied coldly. "Your sentimental attachment to these lower life forms has clouded your judgment. The bonding ceremony has been delayed too long already. Every day you waste pursuing this fantasy, our people suffer." David felt anger rising in his chest. "What gives you the right to force someone into marriage? On Earth, we call that slavery." Kex turned his burning gaze on David, and the human felt like he was being examined by a very dangerous predator. "Ah, so this is the primitive that has turned our princess's head? Tell me, little human, do you know what happens when the Great Barrier fails?" Before David could answer, Kex continued. 7 solar systems, 43 billion souls, all protected by an energy shield powered by the neural bonds of the royal bloodlines. Without the ceremony that joins Zara and myself, That barrier collapses within months. Entire worlds will be consumed by cosmic radiation. The bridge fell silent. David felt the weight of those words crushing down on him. 43 billion people. The number was so large he could barely comprehend it. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Keck smiled, showing teeth like crystal daggers. "Princess, tell your pet human about the Great Barrier. Tell him about the ancient pact that requires royal blood to maintain the shield." Zara's glow dimmed to almost nothing. "It's true," she whispered. "The barrier has protected our worlds for 1,000 years. And the ceremony, the neural bonding with another royal bloodline, it's the only way to renew its power." David felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I hoped there might be another way," Zara said, tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. "Because for the first time in my life, I found something worth more than duty." Kex's expression showed something that might have been satisfaction. "You see, human? Your selfish desires mean nothing against the lives of billions. Return the princess now, and I will make your deaths quick." "Our deaths?" Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "We've done nothing wrong." "You have interfered with Catherian royal business," Kex replied. "The penalty is death. However, I am not unreasonable. Surrender Zara immediately, and I will allow your crew to live as slaves in the mining colonies." "Generous," Dr. Kim muttered sarcastically. David's mind was racing. There had to be another solution. There had to be something they weren't seeing. "What if we could find another way to power your barrier? Human technology might be primitive, but we're good at solving problems." Kex laughed again. "Your species has barely learned to leave its own solar system. The Great Barrier operates on principles beyond your comprehension." "Then explain them," David insisted. "Let our scientists study the problem. Maybe fresh eyes can see something your people missed." "Impossible. The ancient pact is absolute. Only the joining of two royal bloodlines can generate the neural energy required." But as Keck spoke, David noticed something. Zara's emotional state was still affecting the ship's systems. But now something else was happening. The computer displays were showing energy readings that made no sense. Power was flowing through the ship in patterns that shouldn't exist. "Jake," David said quietly to the communications officer, "are you recording these energy readings?" "Yeah, and they're off the charts," Jake whispered back. "Ever since the princess got upset, our power systems have been generating 20% more energy than they should be able to produce." David's heart began to race with a wild hope. Could it be that simple? Could emotion itself be a form of energy? "Zara," he said softly, "when you're with me, when you feel happy, what happens to your abilities?" She looked at him with confusion. "They grow stronger. Why?" "And when we touch, the energy flows between us like electricity, but warm and alive." General Kex was growing impatient. "Enough of this foolishness. You have 1 hour to surrender the princess, or I will begin destroying your ship piece by piece. Perhaps watching your friends die will convince her to abandon this childish rebellion." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "Captain." Rodriguez turned to his crew. "Options?" "We could try to run," suggested Navigator Rachel, "but their ships are faster than ours. We could fight," offered Chief Engineer Tony, "but they'd destroy us in seconds." "Or," David said slowly, an idea forming in his mind, "we could try to prove that there's another way to power their barrier." Dr. Kim shook her head. "David, you're grasping at straws. Even if emotion could generate energy, we're talking about powering a barrier that protects multiple solar systems." "But what if it's not just any emotion?" David asked. "What if it's love? Real, freely given love instead of forced neural bonding?" Zara's eyes widened. David, that's impossible, isn't it? Is it? Every time we're together, every time we touch or feel close, energy flows between us. What if that's not just some side effect? What if that's the real power source your people have been missing? Captain Rodriguez looked between them. You're talking about risking the lives of 43 billion people on a theory. I'm talking about saving them with something better than slavery, David replied. If we're right, Zara doesn't have to sacrifice herself. And if we're wrong, we all die anyway when Kex gets tired of waiting, the captain finished grimly. Through the view screen, they could see the Catherian ships moving into attack formation. Energy was building along their weapon arrays, casting ominous shadows across space. So what do we do? Asked Jake. David looked at Zara, seeing fear and hope warring in her star-filled eyes. We prove that love is stronger than duty, and we pray we're right. Outside, General Kex's ships began their approach, and David knew their time was running out. In less than an hour, they would either make history or become it. The real battle was about to begin. Time was running out faster than David had hoped. Through the view screen, he could see General Kex's ships positioning themselves in a perfect triangle formation around the horizon. Energy weapons were charging, casting an eerie purple glow across the hull of their small research vessel. 30 minutes until their deadline, Jake announced from his communications station, his voice tight with stress. David was hunched over a computer terminal with Zara beside him, frantically running calculations. The idea that love could power the Great Barrier seemed crazy, but the energy readings from their emotional connection were impossible to ignore. Every time Zara touched his hand, the ship's power system spiked by 20%. When she laughed at one of his jokes, the lights brightened throughout 3 decks. "Show me the barrier specifications again," David said to Zara. She waved her hand, and holographic displays filled the air around them. The Great Barrier was enormous, an energy field that surrounded 7 entire solar systems like a giant soap bubble. According to the data, it required constant energy input equivalent to the output of a small star. "This is impossible," Dr. Kim said, looking over David's shoulder at the calculations. "The power requirements are astronomical. Even if emotional energy could somehow be converted to barrier power, you'd need millions of people all feeling the same thing at the same time." "Not millions," David said slowly, studying the holographic models. "Look at this. The barrier doesn't need constant maximum power. It only needs peak energy during renewal cycles, which happen once every 1,000 years. The rest of the time, it runs on stored energy." Zara nodded eagerly. "Yes. That's why the bonding ceremony is so important. The neural link between 2 royal bloodlines creates a massive energy surge that recharges the barrier for another millennium." "But what if the royal bloodlines aren't special because of genetics?" David asked. "What if they're special because they're the only ones who've been allowed to form deep emotional bonds?" Captain Rodriguez walked over to join them. "Explain that theory, David." "Think about it," David said, his excitement growing. "Zara told me her people suppress emotions from childhood. They're taught that feelings are weakness. But the royal families are different. They're allowed to bond with each other even if it's forced. What if that emotional connection is what actually powers the barrier, not some mystical bloodline magic?" Zara's eyes widened. "You think the ancient pact was wrong about the source of the power?" "I think the ancient pact was written by people who didn't understand what they were really doing," David replied. "They saw that bonded royals could power the barrier, so they assumed it was about bloodlines. But maybe it was always about love." Dr. Kim shook her head. "Even if you're right, how do you prove it? And how do you generate enough love energy to power something that protects 43 billion people?" Before David could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. On the view screen, they could see that General Kex's ships had begun firing, not at the horizon, but at a small cargo vessel that had been passing through the area. "They're destroying innocent ships to force our hand," Captain Rodriguez said grimly. Zara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The merchant vessel Starlight. There are families aboard that ship. Children. David watched in horror as the cargo ship tried desperately to escape, but the Catherian weapons were too powerful. In seconds, the vessel was reduced to glowing debris, scattered across space. 15 minutes, Jake called out. General Kex is demanding we respond. I have to go back, Zara said suddenly, tears streaming down her glowing cheeks. I can't let innocent people die because of me. No, David said firmly, taking her hands. We're going to find another way. David, be realistic, Dr. Kim said gently. Even if your theory is correct, we don't have time to test it properly. People are dying. David felt the weight of impossible. Choices pressing down on him. Let Zara sacrifice herself to save billions or risk those billions on an untested theory. Either way, people would die if he was wrong. Then Zara did something that changed everything. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, not to David, but to the entire crew of the Horizon. Suddenly, everyone on the ship could feel what she was feeling, her love for David, her fear for her people, her desperate hope that there might be another way. But more than that, they could feel her genuine care for each of them, even though she'd only known them for days. I can feel all of you, she whispered, her voice echoing in everyone's minds. Your courage, your kindness, your willingness to risk everything for someone you barely know. This is what my people have forgotten. How to truly connect with others. The ship's power systems went crazy. Energy readings spiked beyond anything they'd ever recorded. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main power grid struggled to handle the surge. That's it! David shouted over the alarms. It's not just about two people loving each other, it's about connection. Real, genuine connection between souls. The more people who truly care about each other, the more powerful the energy becomes. Chief Engineer Tony looked up from his readings. David, if these numbers are right, the energy output from the Princess's emotional connection to our crew is already approaching the levels needed for barrier renewal. But we're only 43 people, Dr. Kim pointed out. The barrier protects billions. What if we could teach others? Zara asked, her excitement building. What if instead of forcing two people to bond against their will, we showed entire populations how to truly connect with each other? David's mind was racing. A network of voluntary emotional connections. People who choose to care about each other, to form genuine bonds of love and friendship. The energy wouldn't come from slavery, it would come from freedom. 10 minutes, Jake announced. Through the view screen, they could see another ship in the distance being targeted by Catherian weapons. We have to try, Captain Rodriguez said, suddenly. Even if the odds are against us, we have to try. David nodded. Zara, can you project your connection to us back to your home world? Show your people what real emotional bonding feels like? I can try, she said. But David, if this doesn't work, if the barrier fails because we were wrong, then we'll face the consequences together, David replied, squeezing her hands. But if we're right, if love really is more powerful than force, then we could change. Everything for your people. Zara took a deep breath. What do I need to do? Connect with me, David said. Really connect. Show me everything you feel, everything you hope for, everything you dream about, and I'll do the same. As their hands touched, energy exploded through the ship. Not destructive energy, but something warm and bright and alive. The lights stopped, flickering, and began to glow with a steady, beautiful radiance. Every computer system on the ship began working better than it ever had before. 5 minutes, Jake called out, but his voice was filled with wonder instead of fear. The energy readings are incredible. If this is what happens with just our small crew, then imagine what could happen with entire worlds full of people who truly care about each other, David finished. General Kex's voice crackled over the communications system. Time is up, humans. Surrender the princess now, or face destruction. David looked at Zara, seeing his own determination reflected in her star-filled eyes. "Are you ready to show your people what love really looks like?" "I'm ready," she said. "Whatever happens, I'm ready." Captain Rodriguez activated the ship's communications array. "General Kex, this is Captain Rodriguez. We have a proposal for you. Instead of forcing your princess into slavery, what if we could show you a better way to power your Great Barrier?" Kex's laughter filled the bridge. "You have nothing to offer that could interest the Cytherian Empire?" "We have something you've never seen before," David said, stepping into view of the transmission. "We have proof that love is stronger than force, and we're about to demonstrate it on a scale that will amaze you." As he spoke, Zara began to glow brighter than ever before. The energy of their connection was building toward something unprecedented, and David could only hope they were right about what would happen next. The final test was about to begin. What happened next would be remembered as the moment that changed the galaxy forever. David and Zara stood together in the center of the bridge, their hands clasped as energy flowed between them like liquid starlight. But this wasn't just about the two of them anymore. Every person on the horizon could feel the connection. Dr. Kim's protective concern for her crewmates, Captain Rodriguez's fierce loyalty to his people, Jake's wonder at the impossible things he was witnessing. "I can feel all of you," Zara whispered, her voice reaching every mind on the ship. "Your courage, your hope, your willingness to risk everything for each other. This is what the ancient pact was really about. Not bloodlines, but bonds freely chosen." The ship's energy readings were going completely wild. Chief Engineer Tony was frantically trying to keep the power grid stable as waves of pure emotional energy coursed through every system. "David," Tony called out, "whatever you're doing, it's working. Our power output is increasing exponentially, but it's not destroying anything. It's like the energy knows exactly where it needs to go." Through the view screen, General Kex's ships were still waiting in attack formation. The alien commander's face appeared on their screen, confusion replacing his earlier certainty. "What are you doing to your vessel?" Kex demanded. "My sensors are detecting energy signatures I've never seen before." "We're proving that there's a better way," David said, never taking his eyes off Zara. "Watch and learn." Zara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, not just to the Horizon's crew, but across the vast distances of space to her home world of Kythera. David could feel her consciousness expanding, touching minds light years away. "My people," Zara's voice echoed across space, reaching every Cytherian in the Empire simultaneously. "I want to show you something you've forgotten. I want to show you what love really feels like." And then it happened. Through their connection, Zara projected the emotions she'd experienced with David and the crew. The joy of genuine friendship, the warmth of being accepted for who she truly was, the incredible power that came from people choosing to care about each other without force or obligation. On Kythera, millions of beings who had suppressed their emotions for centuries suddenly remembered what it felt like to truly connect with another soul. In the Crystal Cities, people reached out to touch each other with wonder. In the farming colonies, families embraced for the first time in generations. Even the warriors in their barracks felt tears streaming down their faces as they experienced emotions they'd been taught to see as weakness. General Kex staggered back from his command console. His cold, mechanical composure cracked as feelings he'd buried for decades came flooding back. This is impossible. The old ways taught us that emotions make us weak." "No," Zara said gently, her words reaching him across the void. "The old ways were wrong. Emotions don't make us weak. They make us powerful beyond imagination. But only when freely given, only when chosen from love instead of fear." The effects were immediate and spectacular. As millions of Cytherians began to truly connect with each other for the first time in centuries, energy began building across their empire. Not the harsh, forced energy of neural bonding, but something warm and alive and infinitely renewable. On the distant world where the Great Barrier's control center stood, ancient machines that had run on stored power for 1,000 years suddenly blazed with new life. The barrier itself, which had been slowly weakening as its power reserves drained, suddenly blazed brighter than ever before. Impossible, Kex whispered, staring at his readouts. The barrier is not just holding, it's stronger than it's been in 500 years. And the energy source, it's coming from everywhere. From every world, every city, every person who is feeling these new connections. David smiled, still holding Zara's hands, as energy continued to flow between them. That's the difference between force and love, General. Force can only take energy from a few people at a time. But love creates energy. The more people who truly care about each other, the more powerful it becomes. Dr. Kim was staring at her readings in amazement. The energy output is still climbing. It's like each new connection creates more power than the sum of its parts. Across the Catherian Empire, something remarkable was happening. People who had lived in isolation were reaching out to their neighbors. Warriors were laying down their weapons to embrace their former enemies. Even the ruling classes were stepping down from their crystal towers to walk among their people as equals. But this changes everything, General Kex said, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. If emotions make us stronger instead of weaker, if love is more powerful than duty, then everything we've built our society on is wrong. Not wrong, Zara said compassionately. Just incomplete. Your people learned to be strong through discipline and control, but you forgot that the greatest strength comes from choosing to care about others. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. General, what do you say we call off this whole forced marriage idea? Seems like your barrier problem is solved. For a long moment, Kex stared at them through the view screen. His angular features, which had seemed so menacing before, now looked merely tired. Princess Zara, he said formally, I hereby release you from the bonding obligation. The ancient pact is no longer necessary. Cheers erupted across the bridge. Of the horizon. David felt like his heart might burst with joy as he pulled Zara into his arms. When they kissed, energy sparkled through the air around them, and every light on the ship pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. So what happens now? Asked Jake, grinning from ear to ear. Zara looked around at the crew that had become her family. Now we teach others what we've learned. There are millions of species in the galaxy who have forgotten how to truly connect with each other. Maybe it's time to remind them. An ambassador of love, David said, smiling at the woman who had turned his quiet scientific life into the greatest adventure imaginable. I like it. Over the following months, the horizon became something unprecedented. A ship carrying representatives from 2 different species, traveling the galaxy to share their discovery. Wherever they went, they taught the same simple truth, that genuine emotional connections between people could create energy, solve problems, and build bridges across any gap. Some worlds welcomed them eagerly, others took more convincing. But, slowly, steadily, the message spread. Love was not weakness, connection was not vulnerability. In fact, they were the most powerful forces in the universe. David and Zara's relationship became the foundation for something much larger, a new understanding between species that had never worked together before. Their love story proved that differences in biology, culture, or even the number of dimensions you existed in didn't matter if hearts could find each other. A year later, David stood in the observation deck of the horizon, watching Zara teach a group of young Catherian children how to laugh. The kids were delighted by the strange human custom, and their giggles made the ship's lights dance with joy. Any regrets? Dr. Kim asked, joining him at the viewport. David smiled, watching Zara show the children how to make silly faces. About falling in love with an alien princess who changed everything I thought I knew about the universe? Not a chance. Even though your quiet research career turned into a galaxy-spanning diplomatic mission, especially because of that, David replied. Turns out the best discoveries happen when you least expect them. Through the viewport, he could see ships from dozens of different species traveling together in peaceful convoy. Humans, Catherians, and beings he couldn't even name, working side by side to spread their message of connection and understanding. Zara caught his eye and smiled, that radiant expression that had captivated him from the very first moment. As she walked over to join him, trailing giggling alien children in her wake, David realized that their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. "Ready for our next destination?" Zara asked, slipping her hand into his. "With you?" "I'm ready for anything," David replied. And as the horizon changed course toward another distant star system, carrying its crew of unlikely ambassadors toward new adventures, the energy of their connection continued to ripple outward across the galaxy, touching hearts and changing lives in ways they could never have imagined. Love, it turned out, really was the most powerful force in the universe. And sometimes it just took an alien princess and a curious human scientist to prove it to everyone else.